All right, guys, we're looking at 7.3.1, Integers and Absolute Value. That's the 7th grade textbook, Chapter 3, Lesson 1, and it begins on page 191. Make sure on your paper that you're writing on the very top 7.3.1, Integers and Absolute Value, and that it begins on page 191. The first thing we're going to look at is our real-world link, and it says the bottom of the snowboarding half pipe is 5 meters below the top. And that makes sense. The bottom of the snowboarding half pipe is 5 meters below the top. Circle the integer that you would use to represent its position. Now, -5 is what we would be talking about because it's below the top, and so at a negative position. Describe another situation that uses negative numbers, or negative integers, I should say. And different examples would include when we're talking about temperature, because we can go below 0. Not that that happens here in Florida, but it happens somewhere. Also, the below sea level, when they're talking about going underwater, sea level, or they're talking about volcanoes above sea level. So those are some examples where we'd have some negative numbers. All right, for this, you can just put as your title, Identify and Graph Integers, and then you can write negative integers are integers that are less than 0. They are written with a negative sign. And then you're going to write positive integers are integers greater than 0. They can be written with a positive sign. Now, they don't have to have the plus sign in front of it. It can be just a regular number. It's basically implied when there's no sign that it's positive. It says that integers can be written on a number line. To graph an integer on the number line, you draw a dot on the line at its location. I mean, that's kind of obvious. We've been dealing with that. 0 is neither positive nor negative. I think you guys have gotten that so far too. All right, now for example 1, what I'd like for you to write, say example 1, and I don't need you to write this whole thing, although if you'd like examples that this involves, you can. But the key here is that when it says an average temperature of 5 degrees below normal, that's the important thing. So if you want to write 5 degrees below normal, and then we're going to indicate that that would mean it's -5, okay? That it would be represented with a -5 because of the word below. Same thing for number 2. You can write just 5 inches above normal, and because we're talking about above, that implies a positive, and so it's going to be +5 or just 5 written alone without the positive because it implies that it's positive. Now you're going to do A and B on your own. Go ahead and copy those. A, 6 degrees above normal, and then B is 2 inches below normal. Pause the video to copy those and then also to answer them, and when you come back I'll have the answer. Since we're talking about above, we're talking about 6, or we can write it as +6. And when we're talking about below, we're going to say -2. Oops, easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? All right, now they give us this example, and what I went ahead and did, oops, sorry, I'm trying to put this back. What I did is I just rewrote the number line because I want to explain to you that it's important that you make your number line a number line, not just put, oh, here's 4, 0, and -6. Don't just put those 4 points on there. You need to have it in numerical order. So you're going to have to skip count by 2s, by 4s, by whatever it is that you're doing, but you can't just put the numbers only that we're using. So for example, you couldn't have it like this and go, okay, here's 0, -6, and 4. No. Okay, first of all, the distance between 0 and -6 is not the same distance between 0 and +4. So you're not really showing a correct number line. So this does not work. Show what I have here on the bottom. You're going to write example number 3, and in brackets we're going to be using points 4, -6, and 0, and place those points above the numbers on the number line, please. That way it's just easy to know exactly where those points are. I know they put it on the number line, but if you're not using 2 different colors, it could be hard for me to see where you're talking about. All right. You're happy, right? All right, so here's C and D. You're going to graph these on your own. Go ahead and the 2 things I need to make sure that you're doing correctly is that you're setting up your number line like a number line, and that you are putting the points above the numbers on the number line. So go ahead and do that now. When you come back, I'll have the answers for you. All right, so here's how I chose to skip count on my number lines. I skip counted by 2s, it just makes it easier, and then for the ones that are in between, I just mark a little dash in between. So for C, where I had -7, -7 is between -8 and -6. And then I had my +8 all the way to the right, and then my -2 is right here. For D, I skip counted from -4 to +10 by 2s, and so I have my -4, my -3 is in between -4 and -2, and then 7 is between 6 and 7, and then 10. And sorry my dots come out horribly, but when I start trying to make a circle, which of course it does it for me a little bit there, it comes out crazy, and I'm sorry I can't figure that out. Alright, now we're going to talk about absolute value, which again, you might be noticing that these are all reviews because we have learned this already this year. So for absolute value, the words are the absolute value is the number of a number is the distance between the number and 0 on a number line. The distance from 0. So what I want you to write is absolute value, the distance from 0. Okay, so that's really important. It's not opposites, and I know that when we learned about it before, we're talking about opposites in the same spectrum because, you know, negatives really are the opposite of positives, but when we're talking about absolute value, we're really talking about the distance from 0, which happens to be a positive number, because if you're talking about how far something is from something, we're talking about a distance in positive numbers. Now, obviously the absolute value of 0 is that it's 0 because 0 is, you know, neither positive nor negative, and it's 0 away from 0. But when we're talking about something like -5, -5 is 5 units from 0. +5 is 5 units from 0. So go ahead and copy both those examples down, because a lot of times you guys want to say that it's going to be the opposite. It's not the opposite, it's how far from 0. The distance from 0. So that's absolute value. If you want to write down any of the other stuff here, you absolutely can. I'm going to go ahead and move on. If you need to pause, please do. So example number 4 says evaluate each expression. And so I'd like for you to write example 4, and that's going to be the absolute value of -4. And you have to know the difference between parentheses and absolute value symbol, okay? They're two different things. There's also such things as brackets, and those are not absolute value symbols. And there's also these type of brackets, and those are not absolute value symbols. Absolute value symbols are just the straight up and down lines. So when I'm asking for the absolute value of -4, I want to know how far from 0 that is, the distance from 0, and the answer is 4. It's 4 units away from 0. And so when they give us an equation like they do in example 5, where they say the absolute value of -5 minus the absolute value of 2, you need to find the absolute value of each one first, and then move on to be able to figure out what the answer is. So -5, the absolute value of -5, it's 5 units away from 0. The minus sign is its own, okay? It's in the middle there. It's not wrapped around that absolute value. It's all on its own. So I'm going to bring down the minus sign. Then absolute value of 2 is 2. And so therefore the absolute value of -5 minus the absolute value of 2 is 3. So it's really important for you to understand where these numbers are coming from before you just do -5 minus 2, because you're about to learn how to do it. So it's going to be that you can do -5 minus 2 in the future here, but that's not what it's asking. It's asking the absolute value of -5 minus the absolute value of 2. So it ends up being 5 minus 2, which is 3. All right, this little blurb here says the order of operations. Absolute value bars are considered to be a grouping symbol. So when evaluating -5 minus, absolute value of -5 minus absolute value of 2, you evaluate the absolute values before subtracting. So in order of operations, the absolute values kind of gets lumped in with the parentheses as what you do first. Okay, the grouping symbols, they call it. All right, so now you're just simply going to do the absolute value of 8 Then you're going to do 2 plus the absolute value of -3, and then you're going to do g, which is the absolute value of -6 minus 5. Go ahead and solve those for me. You need to write them all out because otherwise, how are you going to see an example? You're going to write them all out and then solve them as well. So pause the video now so you can write those and solve. All right, so E, you see that the answer should be +8 because that's how far it is from 0. For letter F, you should have done 2 plus 3 because you should have found the absolute value of -3 and then added 2. That's 5. And then G should have found the absolute value of -6, and that's 6, and then subtract 5 and you get 1. Example number 6. Nick climbs 30 feet up a rock wall and then climbs 22 feet down to a landing area. The number of feet Nick climbs can be represented using the expression the absolute value of 30 plus the absolute value of -22. How many feet does Nick climb? So although you are welcome to write this entire story out if you'd like, you can just simply copy down this story instead, like this part, and example 6, and then write this. So he says that he climbs up a rock wall up 30. So up 30 means +30, right? Then he climbs down 22 feet. Now, altogether, if we're talking about how far he went, we're not going to say, oh, he went 30 minus 22. You get what I'm saying? Like, no, he climbed up 30, then he climbed down 22. Like, he climbed a lot. So instead, we would take the absolute value of each of these and add them together. So even though climbing down does indicate -22, it's the total amount that he climbed, and it's not just 8 feet that he climbed 30, and then he climbed down 22. So, I mean, that's a lot. So 52 feet is how much he climbed altogether. So I think it's really important that you understand when a question is asking you to use absolute value and when it actually wants you to do the subtraction. So we'll talk about that more, but just think about it. I mean, how far did Nick climb? Did he climb 8 feet or did he climb 52 feet? He climbed 52 feet, okay? I can tell you that if you were climbing up a rock and you went up 30 and then you came down 22, you would want to include that 22 because I'm sure that going up and down a wall or a rock wall, it's not easier going 22 feet down. You're still climbing it. I bet it's probably even a little bit harder. All right, so that is the end of this section. So this is all review. So hopefully this, reminds you of what we learned, and I will see you in school. Bye.